Hello everybody, this is Bird Brain, where here we are nerdy for the birdies. So with the season's conclusion, we're beginning our off-season content, and we're going to kind of begin with looking back at the season by doing a full season grade video where I grade each position group, letter grades. We did this at the mid-season, of course. I did my mid-season grades video, so we'll see if grades increase, decrease, stayed the same. Reminder, this is position groups, not players. Now, some position groups will be more heavily influenced by certain players than others, but we factor in everybody as long as they took valuable snaps at some point in the regular season or the postseason. And, of course, the grading will contain the postseason, because, of course, this team won the Super Bowl. So without further ado, let's continue with our grades. Starting off with the quarterback position, we have, of course, Jalen Hurts, Kenny Pickett, and Tanner McKee all started games this year. Each quarterback managed to win starts. And I gave the quarterback room an A-, which is an increase from the B+ that I gave it at mid-season. I think that's a fair grade increase. I think the quarterback room was really good. Each quarterback, like I said, won a start this year, and they all played fairly well to really good throughout the season. At the time of mid-season, speaking on Jalen Hurts specifically, I was very critical on the way he started the year, and we'd only had a month after that early start of his improvement, and we saw that continue to increase across the regular season, because from that point on, Jalen only had, I believe, 4 turnovers through the rest of the season. And 2 of those were against the Cowboys in a game where the Eagles got 5 defensively, so it doesn't really matter. But the big thing is that he's gotten much better at taking care of the football, and outside of 3 games, didn't turn it over once down the stretch throughout the season. And that's what you want to see from him. And he improved, and he made the right plays. There were still some slower performances, like against the Panthers or the wildcard game against the Packers, but you do feel very confident with him as a quarterback. And in the biggest games, when the lights are brightest, we saw him shine, especially in the Super Bowl, and he deservingly won Super Bowl MVP. As for the backups, Tanner McKee, Kenny Pickett, I think both played fairly well in their reserve roles. I know people were very critical of Kenny Pickett, and I think he was probably the weakest of the 3 quarterbacks this year. But I still think he played well enough to beat the Commanders, and he was playing well against Dallas as well. He started to grow confidence in the offense. We saw him air the ball out a little bit. Tanner McKee comes in cold. He helps finish out the blowout, and he played pretty nicely against the Giants. A couple of turnover-worthy plays in there as well, but nothing crazy. So it's what you want out of a quarterback room, to have not 1, not 2, but 3 starting options that you feel comfortable enough with to win you football games throughout a season. You feel really good as a GM that you put together a really good quarterback room. So for that reason, I give it an A-. Now we move on to the running back room, which was probably the biggest story of this regular season because of Saquon Barkley having an absolute record-shattering season. Both Eagles history and NFL history, became the 9th running back all-time to run for 2,000 yards in a season. He shattered the Eagles' single-game record and single-season record, and he continued that dominance throughout the playoffs. But of course, this grade reflects not just him, but the entire running back room, and giving them an A, I think, feels very fair. And if I was grading this purely on Saquon, it would be an A+. I thought Kenny Gainwell and Shipley played well in reserve action. I thought they could be better at times. Some of it is just the reserve offensive line play, but some of it is just at the times I'd like them to be better runners. I liked what I saw out of Shipley, especially in the NFC Championship. Gainwell had a really good game against the Steelers on a few catches, and just really made timely plays when the offense needed it, like against the Rams and the Commanders. So you do really trust Gainwell as that 3rd down back, and I expect that he most likely won't be back next year, and he'll be missed in this offense, but it'll be interesting to see if Shipley can take that mantle. So we're just looking to see that running back room continue to get better. But they're already one of the best units on the team, and that's why they get an A. The Now we move on to wide receiver, and this grade is going to feel a little weird because of what the Eagles have done at receiver, but I'm actually going to give the wide receivers an A-. They are up from a B+ at the midseason point. It's hard to grade the Eagles wide receiver room because you've kind of got a tale of two types. You have on one hand A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who have been excellent and continue to be excellent. And then on the other hand, you have kind of everybody else who took snaps at the receiver position. You know, Johnny Wilson, Jahan Dotson, Anais Smith, Paris Campbell. And, you know, their combined production this year is barely 300 yards and a couple touchdowns. Now, speaking on Jahan Dotson, first of that group, we really started to see a lot of growth towards the end of the year. He had a big game against the Giants where he was kind of the number one. He caught not only the first pass, but the first touchdown of the playoffs, and he nearly started off the scoring in the Super Bowl by nearly catching a touchdown. He set us up for the tush-push touchdown in the Super Bowl, so it feels like the chemistry between him and Jalen Hurts is increasing, and if you kind of look at his performance in the Super Bowl, the 2 catches for roughly 42 yards, if he does that over the course of a regular season, if he does that just every game and he's available just 1 or 2 catches, he's going to catch anywhere from 400 to 700 yards and probably a few scores with that. And that's what you kind of want out of your wide receiver 3. We don't necessarily need another 1,000-yard receiver because you already have you have a really good tight end, you have a really good running back, so you don't really need another receiver to go crazy. But if you can just make those plays when he's called upon and he answers the bell, that's what the Eagles want out of him. So I'll keep my eye on him. I'd like to see more out of the rookies for the wide receiver position. Obviously, Anais Smith had some injury issues. We started to see him a little bit as the season went on, but just didn't get many snaps. He was pretty much, he was not active throughout the playoffs. They opted to go with Paris Campbell. We didn't really see much of Paris Campbell down the stretch. He was just active in blocking mostly, and he was just active filling in for Britton Covey. Johnny Wilson, I'd love to see him work on his receiving. He had a really bad drop in the Super Bowl. I feel like if he can put it together with his hands, he could be a really good, like, third down, red zone receiver. That's kind of the role they used him in. He kind of right now has been kind of just another J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, which feels like more of an insult than I mean it to be, because if you drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in the 6th, you feel better about it than you do in the 2nd, which that's where they got Johnny Wilson, so hopefully he continues to develop this offseason. Obviously, with AJ and Devontae, I saved the best for last. They continue to be great. They had the moments here and there where they didn't have the biggest games, but when called upon, they made the catches necessary. And of course, they pretty much pushed this grade up, because if I graded this position on the 2 of them, it'd be much higher in the A's. But I have to count for the whole room, so I do have to weigh it down. But I think an A- is a fair grade. Next, we have the tight end room, which I've now bumped to a B+ from a B. It's hard to grade this room because of the absence of Dallas Goedert. When Dallas Goedert was healthy, he was a really good tight end. He made plays consistently. He was available. He kind of is Jalen Hurts' safety blanket. He's been that pretty much his entire career, but it feels like on key down and distances, he's looking for that guy to throw to. It's usually Goedert, even more than even AJ and Devontae, which I think it speaks to a lot of the chemistry that developed. We saw Grant Calcaterra continue to grow and develop as the tight end too. He caught his first touchdown this year. But really this position, outside of Goedert, struggled a lot in run blocking, and we saw it a lot when the Eagles would go to 12 personnel, and again, the injuries to Goedert, it's hard to give this position group a higher grade. I will say I thought Goedert was very underrated. In the playoffs, it felt like, especially in the Packers and Rams game, at times when Jalen needed to make a play, he was the guy that made it. He had a big touchdown where he stiff-armed Valentine, I think it is, against from the Packers into the end zone for a touchdown, and then he had that big catch against the Rams to kind of get the offensive scoring going again. So it just feels like he trusts Goedert. He had a big game in the NFC Championship as well. He was a little more quiet in the Super Bowl, but I think a lot of that was just the game got so out of hand that the Eagles just kind of started running it more, and Goedert wasn't needed too much in that regard. But as a tight end, he's still one of the best. It just matters when he's healthy. But yeah, in terms of the other tight ends, E.J. Jenkins caught a touchdown, but other than that, nothing really else from anyone else that played on this team. Saw a little bit of E.J. Jenkins down the stretch, some C.J. Uzoma. Nothing really there, so it's hard to give this position group an A, but I think a B+ is fair, factoring in what this group did when fully healthy. And then, of course, we move on to the offensive line, which is another one of the strong position groups, and I gave it an A. I think I stayed with the same grade. Part of the reason why I couldn't give it an A+, which is sometimes it felt like at times the offensive line would miscommunicate certain protections, would lead to, unblocked blitzes getting to Jalen. So that has to get cleaned up. But you really have to speak to what this offensive line did. There was a lot of fear about what could happen to this offense without Jason Kelce. Cam Jurgens stepped up, and I thought he did a pretty solid job. I think he's been a better run blocker than pass protector, but I think he's still been pretty solid as a pass protector. Jordan Mailata's growth this year has been incredible. He's been arguably the best left tackle in the league. Landon Dickerson, his performance this season, especially the NFC Championship on a bad knee, playing center was crazy, and then Cam with his back. How about Mekhi Becton's, playing a brand new position? I thought he played fairly well throughout the season, and of course, Lane is Lane. And I also want to shout out Fred Johnson and Tyler Steen for stepping in at various points. Tyler Steen having to play in the NFC Championship and even took snaps in the Super Bowl. Fred Johnson, had to play in Mailata's absence. So these guys, they got some roles and reps, and I thought they played very well. So obviously that offensive line, huge reason why this team was very successful. There's still areas of improvement, and I think guys can get better, and I'm curious to see what it will look like next year. So we move on to defensive tackle, and this group I have given an A, and they are up from an A-. Where to start? It just felt like this group was a huge reason why the Super Bowl began, or kind of ended the way it did. They were just collapsing the pocket, and Milton Williams was a monster throughout that game. Jalen Carter's been a monster in the playoffs as well, especially against the Rams. Jordan Davis is really starting to take some big steps. You saw him really improve, especially against the Ravens and the Commanders. As a run defender, we saw him get 2 sacks in the postseason in the Commanders game in the Super Bowl. Obviously, Moro Jomo's starting to step up, and he's going to have a bigger role most likely next year. Thomas Booker, not so much work down the stretch, but we saw him more again in the earlier parts of the season, but I thought he was really good. So you think you have a really good young defensive tackle room, and that's the big thing about it. Kind of a concern was, is this group going to be okay without a veteran? And they handle themselves, and we can see just how strong of a unit this is. And, Milton Williams, I don't think is going to be back with the Eagles next year, because I think he's going to command too much money. But he's going to be a very good defensive tackle, and the fact that you developed him as a third-round pick into what he's become, is you should be really excited as a team. Moving on to edge rusher, and I've bumped this group up to a B+, and a lot of it because of the development of Nolan Smith. He really came on as a pass rusher in the last couple of months of the season. I think he honestly ended the year as arguably the team's best pass rusher. It actually just came out yesterday that Nolan Smith had torn his triceps and during the Super Bowl, which is insane that he even played that game. Brandon Graham was playing really well until he tore his, and Josh Sweat could have arguably been the Super Bowl MVP, so you gotta be really happy about this group. Jalex Hunt really started to step up big in the Super Bowl, and you get excited for his development. And of course, one of the things that does hold this room back is Bryce Huff, and look, he didn't have the season we expected or hoped he could have. I still think there's something there. The Eagles don't necessarily have to give up on him. I think they can try to work it out. But at the end of the day, you do expect a little bit more from someone based on what his contract is. So I think a B+ is fair for the overall group. Now we move to linebacker. Linebacker is an A. You had a Defensive Player of the Year candidate as one linebacker. You had a massive star in development as another linebacker, and even a really good reserve linebacker. We saw Zach Bond, who many of us viewed as an afterthought pretty much until the week 1 opener. And then we realized, oh no, this guy's actually really good. And Nakobe, his development, it was a little rocky to start the year, and then he just kind of got better and better and better. And it's a shame he got injured when he did, because he was really having a good season. Oren Burks, how about him stepping up in the playoffs, for an injured Nakobe? And I thought he played really well. He had a good forced turnover against the Commanders. So this linebacker room has really come along. And we still have Jeremiah Trotter waiting in the wings. I mean, I think a lot of fans have forgotten that this room started off with Devin White in it, and we all thought he was going to be the team's best linebacker. And now he's not even on the team anymore, and we feel stronger for it. So that just goes to show the development and the steps that room took this offseason. And of course, we go to cornerback, which I have given it the team's only A+. Because the room played super well, and I think it's also very, very deep. And really, they didn't have many bad games at corner. There was a couple, like Week 16 against Washington, where guys got burned. I mean, you have Slay, who turned back the clock this year, and he's talking about potential retirement in a year or so, but he doesn't look like his age. I've seen 34-year-old corners, right? I've seen 30-year-old corners, and Slay looks better than both of them. He was really, really good this year. How about Quinyon Mitchell as a rookie looking really, really good this year? Cooper DeJean getting a pick 6 in the Super Bowl. Hold on a second. Let me go back to Quinyon. Quinyon didn't have a pick in the regular season. He gets 2 picks in the playoffs at big spots. Basically ends 2 playoff games with picks. I mean, that's what you want him to be. And now you start to see those flashes, and he's going to put it all together. You look at Isaiah Rodgers. I thought he played well at stretches when he came in. Keely Ringo made some plays this year. All of these guys just in the cornerback room taking snaps. And depending on where you put him, Avonte Maddox, he wasn't... At times he played this year, but he had a really nice pass breakup in the Super Bowl. I thought he made some plays on special teams as well. And I think he really embraced the reserve role. So you have a really nice cornerback room with a lot of young developing players, and it's interesting to see how they're going to continue to grow together. And of course we move to safety, which I am going to give a B, which feels a little low, but a lot of it is because you have to factor in the depth chart. Reed and CJ, very good. I thought the backups were a little lacking at times. I thought Tristan McCollum wasn't great in coverage and struggled a lot of times. He was there. He did make a big play against Baltimore. He had a 4th down. We'll call it a pass breakup, but instead of a dropped pick. But, he made a play there, but I thought at times he was exposed in coverage. Sidney Brown, I thought he had a really nice pick against the Giants to pretty much end the regular season. But you do think about sometimes his recklessness with plays. You think about sometimes he misses tackles, but he has become a really good special teamer as well. You also have, going back to Reed and CJ, combining for 10 picks this year. CJ getting his first pick 6. You do have to knock down points because CJ did give up a lot of touchdowns this year. Some were just kind of tough plays for him to make, but some were just missed assignments and whatnot. So that is things that you have to think about. But I think as a whole, as a group, I think they played a little better than their grade represents, but I think I kind of have to be fair to the safety group. And last but not least, we have special teams, which I did give a C+, and it's the harshest grade of any of the units for the Eagles. And I know that sounds harsh, but we have to be honest. Your kicker hit 70% this year. There was a lot of times that the special teams unit had bad penalties and lapses in judgment and made mistakes that cost the team yards. But they got much better in the playoffs. Jake Elliott did still miss a couple extra points in playoff games, and he missed a field goal, but he was very good in the Super Bowl. So I think a C+ is fair for the season. Wasn't perfect, but they made plays when necessary. They forced a couple turnovers. So as a unit, could be better. But I think, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And if the rumors are true that Jake Elliott did indeed have an injury, Maybe that's why he wasn't kicking perfectly. Hopefully he's healthier next year, we'll see. Anyways, this has been Bird Brain. Hope you guys enjoyed being nerdy for the birdies. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the grades, feel free to share. I'd love to debate with you guys in the comments. Anyway, this is Bird Brain. Hope you guys enjoyed. Fly, Eagles, fly. See you around.